I don't think that that's the sufficient reason to go to that post-bac program.
Ask the Dean, episode 34. Dr. Scott Wright, how are you?
Doing well, Ryan Gray. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. I just got off a call with a good friend who's now director of admissions at one of the newest medical schools in the country, osteopathic medical schools.
Yeah, Norda.
At Norda, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So excellent. That's a Premed Years episode coming out this weekend. Or this week. And so that was a great conversation. That I'm excited to release. Rachel Grubbs, how are you?
I am well. I'm glad you talked to our common friend over at Norda.
Yes.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Anderson.
Yeah, she's sweet.
We had a big push in Mapped this morning with the update for lots of things. What specifically went out today, Rachel?
Well, lots of feedback variables. It just happened a couple hours ago, so for those of you watching live, you're not going to see magic in your feedback tabs just yet, but we're able to do a lot more. So some of the feedback you guys had given us when we first released this feature is that you wanted more deep dives into courses and credit hours. So really looking at upward trends by patterns and what about my last 20 hours and what about my first 20 hours. And we have a lot more ability to dig into that than we did before. So over the coming, 3-4 business days and then weeks for people watching live, or people watching the replay, it's January 25th today. So by the time this hits YouTube, should all be there. But just a lot more nuance in the feedback we can give. So that's
cool.
Exciting.
Cool.
And it was cool because today again with Kristen at Norda, they said they specifically look at more focus on the last 60 hours. So I'm glad that we can start dialing in some of that data. And I specifically asked, is that 60 hours undergrad, master's, both? She said 60 hours total, whatever it is. So, all right. Ready to get into some questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple pre-pasted. There are a few more pre-asked, so start with the private chat and you'll catch up to me.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. All right, so first question here. As a non-traditional applicant, I never really counted how many hours I volunteered or participated in clubs and sports before I decided to pursue medicine, and until I realized that you have to supply a number on apps. Some of these activities were years ago, and I absolutely do not remember how much of my time I spent doing them. How do I estimate hours for my application for these activities?
You answered your own question. You estimate hours.
You estimate them, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you have to. If you didn't keep track of it, you have to just say, because they're not going to call the coordinator and say, "Did he really do 45 hours at your place?" and stuff like that. So just estimate the best you can, and that's all you can do.
That's all you can do. Best guess. Yeah, nothing's getting checked, so you're not going to get called out. Obviously, it needs to make sense. It can't be super exaggerated.
Right. I would say go on the conservative side, but yeah, that's probably best.
Agree. Next question. I'd love some feedback regarding my situation. I'm a non-trad with a large family, small business, home, and completing my bachelor's degree. I volunteer to sit with CPS children in the hospital as they physically recover and have been virtually shadowing. I find this is really all I have time for in my schedule at the moment. I worked as a CNA for many years in the past, but it has been over 6 years since I've worked in healthcare. I plan to get more clinical experience during the summer. Do we have the rest of the question, Rachel, or no? That was all that was.
The summer months, this is when I'll have time in my schedule. Finally having the time and finances to pursue this dream of medicine just wasn't possible until now. I don't want to sound like I'm just, quote, checking boxes, end quote, but how will a med school admissions committee view me with my current experience? So it sounds like she's saying she's going to get a bunch of clinical after she submitted her application.
Yeah, so I would say in that situation, don't submit until into the summer. I mean, typically, or at least maybe midway through the summer, until you've accumulated some of those hours, and you have can put them on there, not as only future tense stuff, but as current and future tense stuff. Because otherwise, if you just say, well, I plan to do this during the summer, that's relevant, but it's not the same as having already done it or started it or whatever. So I would say, I mean, my opinion on that would be maybe, depending on when you start, give it a few weeks and then submit your application, having had a few weeks under your belt, and say, this is what I am going to continue to do for the remainder of the summer. Cool.
All right, and then the next one cuts off too as well, Rachel, so if you can be prepared to finish this one. So out of high school, I lived in New Zealand for 2 years, serving as a service and proselytizing missionary with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It was an incredible experience and probably what opened my eyes to how much better life is when you put other people as the focus of your life instead of yourself. Anyway, my advisor has told me to not even mention it because it places me into the, quote, religious pile, which ends up in the garbage, and because the LDS Church has the stigma
of being conservative, which also ends up in the garbage. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts is that advice is garbage.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've had students in the past who were LDS students and went on their mission, and their mission was incredibly impactful for their story. And so I say you have to tell your story, and you have to tell what happened and how it impacted you and all that. Now, when you're doing that, you have to avoid as much as possible using language that is too LDS-ish language. In other words, so, for example, you would not want to use the word proselytizing missionary. In other words, it's one thing, in my view, it's one thing to say I was there as on a service mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or whatever church you're involved with. But I do think there's a concern for medical school admissions committees, particularly members of missions committee who are not religious, or who don't have, that sort of angle to their life, that you're going to use your practice of medicine as a proselytizing effort. And whether or not you intend on doing that, I hope you don't. But what my point here is, you have to recognize who your reader is. And your reader may have no idea of what LDS is all about. They may have heard things, and they may have heard negative things, or they may have heard positive things, or whatever. But you can't use jargon that is churchy jargon. That would be something to avoid. And I think that you focus in on the meaning as you just did in this question, putting other people as the focus of your life instead of yourself. That's very impactful language that everybody, regardless of their religious background or whatever upbringing, they understand what that means, putting other people first. So first and foremost, I think you have to be careful about using too much churchy language that may not be understood by a reader, and be very clear on what your intentions are within the context of medicine.
Yeah.
But I do not agree that there's a religious pile that ends up in the garbage, or that there's a conservative pile that ends up in the garbage either. I don't agree that that's the case.
Yeah, we've actually gotten a couple of questions, not as specific as the volunteer missionary work, but about, religion and politics lately. And I mean, 50% of America is conservative, 65% of America is Christian. Like, those aren't red stripes.
Right.
That's right. Part of our makeup.
Yeah.
We're made up of other things too. Right.
Yeah.
But that hasn't suddenly gone away. I wanted to ask a question around this. I know we've been on this topic for a while, but I think it's really meaty. So sometimes when we have folks who have done military service, they'll talk about, well, technically I'm on 24/7, but maybe 20 hours a week I was doing medic work, so that counts as clinical, right? But they're not counting
everything.
All of their time in the military as clinical. They're just counting the time they were actively being medic. And I don't know if this for this particular question asker, I don't know what her exact scope of work was. And I'm sorry, it might have been in the question, but I was still trying to moderate in comments. But like, I'm thinking of the example of a lot of students in Ohio go to Central America to do missionary work, but while they're down there, they're doing work that's a lot like Habitat for Humanity. So there is some evangelism, right? That's a big part of Christianity in Ohio, is to go somewhere where they speak Spanish and do some converting. But they also are building houses for people. So I just wondered, is this the kind of thing where someone might think about trying to extract the thing I did that is separate from my church work as service? Like, I mean, I just wondered, do you think that that's key to how they define it? Like when you're literally counting hours, like if you're doing missionary service for 2 years, are you counting? I mean, obviously you're not counting when you sleep and whatnot, but do you think that what the volunteer work needs to be quantified or separated into groups?
You could do it that way, in my view. You could do it that way. You could say, well, when I was on mission, we would go once a week for 5 hours and do, build houses, or we would go work in clinic in a clinic for 2 days a week, and that was typically 8 to 10 hours a day, whatever. You could do it that way. I think some students could also do it in terms of the big capsulation of saying, I was on mission for these 2 years, for basically 40, 50, 60 hours a week. We did service and stuff. And these are the things I did in that service opportunity. In those hours, I did X, Y, and Z. And, do it that way. So I don't think either way is right or wrong. I think it depends on what the student is comfortable with and focuses and how they want to focus the reader in terms of what they're trying to get across.
Mm-hmm.
I want to bring up the LDS one more time, just to make sure that the conversation is around putting LDS in the activity section and potentially not putting LDS in a personal statement, unless, as we always talk about, unless it is specifically tied to why do you want to be a doctor. Now,
right.
Where I find this trap is very common for LDS students is the narrative around service, and go, well, as an LDS church member, service is ingrained to us. It's part of our life. I went on this 2-year mission. I love service of people, and that's why I want to be a physician. In my mind, that's not a good reason as to why you want to be a physician, right? Just stay in the church and go proselytize for the rest of your life. That doesn't mean just because you like service and service to others doesn't mean that you should be a physician. So
right.
Just be careful with that narrative.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and again, I think I'm erring on the side of reprobing, because I really want to make sure our listeners understand we're thinking about this from many different angles. That would also be true if someone's personal statement said, I worked for the Red Cross as, a phlebotomist for 10 years, and I loved that service for people. Like, well, maybe that's all you want to do, right? Like, or I did Habitat for Humanity. Like, do you want to go into construction, right? Like, clinical work is good. Different experiences are good. But if that's in your personal statement, how does that tie directly?
Yeah.
To, like, you got to think about the seed that said medicine.
Yeah. Exactly. As opposed to a seed that says ministry, or a seed that says,
art,
construction, or, whatever, art. Yeah. Good.
We're at the point now where the questions look like they're for me, because I'm just pasting in from other people. So you can grab those, Ryan.
Let's see. So this one here, student asks, I've shadowed a DO for a long time, and I know he will write me a strong letter along with my MD letter.
Oh, he wants to know, can he send a DO letter to an MD school?
You can send a DO letter to an MD school. I would not send an MD letter, a DO letter, or every letter you can get kind of letter, but yes, a DO letter. This is actually a question that came up in our Premed Hangout recently. A student asked if they could replace an MD letter with a PA letter, and I said no. But a DO letter is equivalent to an MD letter, so that's perfectly fine, even for allopathic MD schools.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Another student asks, what are the pros and cons of taking post-bac undergraduate classes at the same school you plan to apply to?
Yeah, I don't like that idea for a couple of different reasons. One is, depending on the size of the school, you're going to run out of classes to take. If you're upper level biology, if you're a biology major originally,
reset this, Scott. So I think you're thinking of the same school that you did undergrad at. This question is the same school you plan to apply to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. No, I that would be fine. I just don't think you can have unrealistic expectations that's going to somehow. Now, if they have a linkage program where you get an automatic interview or automatic, whatever, then that's one thing. But I think you have to have realistic expectations about that, about how that's going to go. And I don't think that's the sufficient reason to go to that post-bac program is because of those linkages and stuff. I think you find one that really fits your needs in a broader sense, and then you go for it. And if there are linkage programs, then that's gravy.
Yeah. I boosted my volume, by the way, inside of StreamYard, so let me know if you all can hear me better.
Whoa. Just kidding.
So there are some schools, right? We do know of some schools that have some preference for their undergraduate counterparts. Those are usually state schools that UC Riverside is one that comes to mind, right? Riverside Medical School does save some seats for Riverside undergraduate students, but that is very mission specific to that school because they are trying to serve a specific population, the Inland Empire of California, of Southern California. And those students at that undergrad are typically from that same area as well.
Right.
So there's one.
So if you're from Northern California, go to Riverside. Don't expect necessarily, or if you're from Nevada or Arizona or wherever.
Yeah, and then expanding on that, all right, a very common why do you want to come to this school answer is, well, I did my undergrad here. Like, okay, so like, what does that mean?
Yeah, so what?
It means my significant other's here. They're younger than me.
I know all the happy hour special local spots.
We're giving you more credit than that. I'm sorry. I'm just being playful. I love you, pre-meds. All right, let's see. Next one.
Is leadership experience a necessary part of the application? Can I show leadership in my other activities that impacted me?
Absolutely, you can. It's necessary. I don't know about that. Beneficial, yes, I think so. You can definitely show leadership in a lot of different ways. It's not, you don't have to, there's no pigeonhole thing that says you have to do it this way or that way. So there's a lot of different ways that you can show leadership, and certainly in other activities that impacted you. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a great part of an application if you have it. Necessary is probably a little bit of a strong word, I would say, but I think you have to think broadly about what leadership is all about and what are the skills related to leadership, and then talk about those skills that you've developed through these activities. So I think it's a very doable thing, and it's not stretching the truth or whatever. You're really just pointing out things that you've done that have an impact. Yeah.
Yes, that all comes down to impact, right? It's that last word you mentioned, impact.
It's the so what. It's the so what part.
It's the so what, exactly. So if you're not specifically labeling an experience, quote unquote, leadership, can you still find a way to work in a story of leadership? Or there are potential opportunities depending on how many activities you have and what you need to do. Is there an opportunity to split an activity into two, where one of them is the leadership side of the activity and the other one is non-leadership? So perfect example I see all the time is someone who was a scribe, and they'll have one activity that says scribe, and then in the description somewhere, they briefly mention, oh, I was like the scribe trainer or the lead scribe or whatever potential language that is. I'm like, is there a potential opportunity, depending on the impact, again, going to the impact of that position, can you potentially list being the lead scribe or head scribe or scribe trainer, whatever that is, as a separate activity, label that as leadership, and then focus on the impact as a leader in that description, and then put the quote unquote just describe as a separate activity in there as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a very good example.
This is the last of the ones that look like they're from me, and then we'll get to live questions.
Previously thought I wanted to be PA. Now I'm fully committed to med school. Welcome to the dark side. In that time, I have lost contact with most of my school professors. How should I go about reconnecting with them without giving the impression that I need them just for a letter of recommendation? I've only been out of undergrad for a year. Oh, just a year? You reconnect with them.
Yeah. You just, I mean, that's part of their job, and they do it for alums, all the time. And I would just say, you just have to just do it and just contact them and say, hey, how's it going? Here's what I'm doing. Can you write me a letter?
Yeah.
That's basically it. It's real straightforward.
Yep.
I think what you don't do is somehow, contact them and chit chat and everything. And then, at the end say, oh, by the way, it'll be a little transparent what you're up to.
Yeah.
It's gonna be so much worse.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, don't make me wonder.
Just hit it up front. Hey, I need a letter.
No. I wanted to ask if volunteering at flu clinics and COVID testing sites where my responsibilities are to check patients in, answer the questions, count as clinical experience.
I would say yes.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
That's an easy one.
Yeah.
Remember, clinical is what are you doing? Not where are you? Not not what is your title? What are you doing? Interacting with patients in any sort of clinical-ish way. Right. The one caveat I always give to that is like outside of patient registration, because I got into an argument once with a student saying, well, I do patient registration in the emergency department. I'm like, it's not clinical, but I'm talking directly to the patients. I'm like, it's not clinical.
You're asking their name, phone number,
insurance number.
Yeah.
Not clinical. But yes, checking them in. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Anything going on? You have any questions about what's going on today?
Yeah. Vital signs. You certainly, if you do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely. I'm a non-trad who had many W's and F's when I first decided to go to college in 2015.
This gets way cut off. This is it's mini scrolls.
I'm assuming this means W's and F's when I first decided to go to medical school in 2015.
No, it says college.
Well, I know, but that doesn't make sense if they had W's and F's before they decided to go to college, unless that was in high school. Anyway, or go back to college maybe in 2015. I ended up leaving school and not coming back for personal health-related issues. In the summer of 2020, I decided to go back to school at a new community college in my hometown and have maintained a 4.0 for the past 2 terms. I am in the process of doing an academic renewal at my previous school, and I'm on track to enter a tag agreement. Tag, you're it, with UC Davis for the neurobiology, physiology, and something.
All right, I'm trying to go through this. I was actually just writing this person to see if they could condense it. It looks like the crux of the question is, will my previous Fs hinder my GPA so much that it won't matter?
Yes,
So it sounds like those Fs are on the college record, not high school.
Yeah, they're going to go into the calculated GPA.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. Now, what you do with that, say if there's a lot of them, and even if you go into I forget what word you used for that, but academic renewal program or something.
Yep.
AMCAS doesn't care about that. You still have to count everything. So,
yep.
So yeah, it's going to hinder you. Now, the question is, what are you doing now, and how are you moving forward with that? So, making good grades at community college is a good start. Making good grades at university to finish out, your program, your degree, or whatever is a necessity. No luxury for, I would say, very little room for B's and no room for C's or below. I mean, you gotta really hit it out of the park.
Yeah.
For the remainder. Not that you have to have a 4.0, but there's very little wiggle room. You've gotten yourself in a hole, and in order to climb out of it, you've got to really do well.
Yeah. Never say never, right? We talk about schools all the time. We talk about upward trends. Again, the director of admissions who I just talked to for the pre-med years this week, they're looking at the last 60 hours. I know schools that look at last 20 hours. There's some schools that do the 32-hour rule. So never, ever, ever say never.
Right. Agreed.
Unless you say never, say never. Then you can say never.
Oh, my God.
That gets confusing. At what point are clinical experience or related extracurricular experiences outdated? I don't think they're ever outdated.
Well, we have talked about if you did it in high school.
Well, that's not outdated. That's pre-allowed.
Yeah, before the. So, I mean, I would say
splitting hairs, Ryan.
Well, I would say that the issue here more is if you did clinical hours, let's say 10 years ago, and you haven't done anything since, then that's a problem. If you did stuff a lot, 6-8 years ago, and you've continued to do things throughout the recent past, then you're good. I mean, you include all that on your application, and it doesn't get outdated. It's just a continuation of what you've been doing for many years. And so I don't think the word outdated is accurate, but I understand what they're trying to say. And if there's been a lag and you don't have as much now and you had a bunch before, then I think that could be problematic, not because they're outdated, but because of,
they're skewed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think exactly right. The outdated, I don't think is ever a thing, because the application we talk about all the time is your story of your journey. And so something you did 10 years ago is still pertinent potentially, but you have to have been doing some things. If you took a hiatus in the last 6 months, year, 2 years, when you've decided to get back into this, you have to show that continued experience going on. But if that's a similar situation, what you did 10 years ago is still very relevant.
Yeah.
And again, the general rule of thumb, kind of what Rachel, you were talking about, is after high school is generally what we want to see, or the general rule of thumb for the application.
Right. After graduation from high school.
Yep.
Yes.
What are med schools looking for in the following experiences? Research, shadowing, clinical experiences, and community service. Oh, this is
I think actually Ryan wrote a book on that, and so can you just read your book?
Yes. Yes, they are looking for research, shadowing, clinical experience, community service.
Yes, they're definitely looking for those.
Yeah, it's an impossible question to answer. We're not laughing at you, the student. It's just an impossible question to answer. It's basically like saying, tell me everything I need to do to get into medical school, which it's just, we can't answer that. You need clinical experience to formulate in your own brain and reassure yourself that you want to be a physician, that you like being around patients. Shadowing to understand what the life of a physician is like is important for you to formulate and make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into. Research is important to show curiosity and inquisitiveness and challenging the status quo. Community service is important just to show service above yourself. All of those are important. None of them are super required. But go and do what you want to do.
Yeah. Agreed.
How do medical admissions review 31 credits of postbac coursework? Most are 300, 400 level, but 10 credits of 200 level sciences from the very beginning of the postbac work.
Well, I think so. My feeling would be, for example, if you had to go back and take general chemistry or general biology, those are going to be lower level courses. So in this questioner's vernacular, 200 level science courses before you can get to three, as well as physics, before you can get to 300, 400 level classes. So post-bac, particularly if you're a second career person and you had a bachelor's in something else and are having to go back and start, the sciences from scratch, then that's going to pretty much be the way it is. Or if you're retaking classes that you did poorly in previously, those might be some lower level type of courses that you'd have to take. So I think it depends a little bit in the 31 credits of what the mix is. What I think admissions committees really want to focus in on are upper level biological science classes as much as possible to see what kind of performance you can have in those rigorous science classroom courses. Not that lower level sciences are easy or not rigorous, but I think it is a little bit different. At least that's my take on this particular question.
What should go into a letter of intent versus a letter of interest? So I want to for once and all, not for all, but take a stand right now that letter of interest should not exist, period. Right? Your application is your letter of interest.
Right.
Letter of intent, completely different story. We can talk about that. But I don't know what you think about that, Scott. I don't know if you see a specific situation where a letter of interest potentially comes into play. I don't know.
See, I sort of see timing as a part of the difference.
Yeah.
So a letter of interest might be sent if you are on a wait. Let's say, for example, if you're on a waiting list at a medical school, and you might send a letter of intent that says, if I'm offered a place, I will come. That's a letter of intent that
Correct.
says, I intend to come if I'm offered a place in your class.
Correct.
Letter of interest, I would see as more of general, saying, hey, I'm really interested in your school. Please give me an interview or whatever.
But that's what the application is. Like, hey, I'm really interested in your school.
I totally agree with that. I'm just pointing out kind of what I see as the differences. Yeah. And I agree completely that a letter of interest is unnecessary. I think medical schools, talking about trash bin, I think they probably keep them, but they're meaningless. I don't think they're, that just doesn't do anything for an admissions committee, because they get so many and they hear so many stories about, oh, I'll go there, I promise, and this is my favorite school ever, and I've never want to go anywhere else. And then they offer you a place, and you're gone. You're going somewhere else. And it's like, what the hell?
Don't do that, please.
Yeah.
So letter of intent, in my mind, a good opportunity for a letter of intent is post interview, right? Because you're saying, yep, I'm gonna come there. You've already interviewed me. You've shown that you liked me. Now I'm calling in my dibs here that I want to come to you. It's a good opportunity potentially to mention any weaknesses, to say, hey, I know I enjoyed interviewing with you. I know that this weakness came up in my interview. Here's what I'm doing to work on it. I want to let you know that if you do accept me, I will come, right? In whatever language that looks like.
Yeah.
And it makes it even stronger, especially right now with the new traffic rules, the AAMC traffic rules. If you can say, I already have an acceptance to another school, but if you accept me, I will come, right? It takes the neediness out of it. And because schools can't see that information anymore until much later on in the cycle, it gives them a better chance of predicting their numbers.
Yeah, that's right. Agreed.
Would it be wise to address academic dishonesty and other challenges during my undergrad that may have impacted grades during some terms, like sudden deaths, mental health issues, divorce, etc.?
Well, you have to mention academic dishonesty.
Yeah. Those are two separate things, right? Academic dishonesty falls under institutional action, right? Which you have to mention.
Yeah. Now the other stuff. Yeah, the other stuff, I think you mention them as it relates to your story. Whether that's in the personal statement or some optional essay or a secondary essay. So for example, a common secondary application question is to address any adversity or difficulties that you've experienced in your life and how you met those challenges. And so that's where you would potentially mention divorce or death of a parent or a grandparent or something that was really meaningful to you or whatever. Mental health issues are touchy subject. And I think you have to be very careful with that, related to it. Really has to be a significant part of your story. But even at that, I think you have to be very careful in how you talk about it and how you talk about what it meant in your life and how you've overcome those difficulties or whatever. Not to scare you, but I do think it can be a little dicey sometimes depending on what the issue is.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say to some degree that's true with any of the major life issues, right? Like, unfortunately, we are still dealing with a little bit of stigma around mental health, but absolutely. A sudden death is horrible. And I'm sorry if that happened to you. A divorce is traumatic for everybody involved. Yeah. But life happens during med school too. So I think the key thing, Scott, that you said that this listener needs to resonate with is how I overcame it. How did I work through that challenge? So that, if it's part of your story and that's why your grades went down, I think that's okay to talk about, to at least, briefly acknowledge. But the real thing you want to talk about is what you did to work through it, not the thing happening to you, but the thing you learned from the thing happening to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you could also I had a student that I was working with recently who had an addiction issue. And had been addicted to drugs and alcohol, and was spent a year in a rehab program, and has been, and this was a very important part of his story. So he told the story, and he now has 6 acceptances and is trying to decide what he wants to do. So it's very possible right.
Not too shabby there, Dr. Wright.
Right. And it's all because of my assistant.
Has nothing to do with his resilience in the face of adversity.
Right, exactly. It's all me.
All right, let's pop up this next one.
One of my classes this semester is online and does not meet regularly, nor does the professor have regular office hours. How can I develop a connection with the professor so I can ask for a letter of recommendation toward the end of semester? Should I tell them now that I'm looking to get a letter of recommendation later? I'll answer the last question first. Yes. And the first question last. That's going to be hard.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. The whole point of a letter of recommendation is they know who you are. They can speak to who you are, your personality, your strengths, weaknesses, whatever. Yeah. An online class where you're not meeting with a professor ever that's going to be tough.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's going to make it difficult. My immediate question is it absolutely necessary to get a letter from that particular professor? Are there other professors that you could potentially get a letter from instead? So That may not be possible though.
Yeah. I was wondering if pet therapy is considered clinical experience. I was pre-vet most of college, and I've spent a lot of time at nursing homes taking baby goats, chickens, rabbits, dogs, and other therapeutic farm animals to patients while providing emotional support. Before we answer this, I think this always cracks me up because my wife has severe allergies, and I always like therapy dogs are so common in hospitals. I'm like, what if patients are allergic? But I diverge.
Yeah. So I see this as clinical. You're dealing with patients, the patients in the nursing home. I mean, what's the difference between that and going and reading a book to them? Or, in this case, you're just taking farm animals and playing with the patients and stuff like that. So I think it's clinical.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I feel like this person front-loaded the question in a way that made it seem like it's not.
Yeah.
Like there's 30 words about animals before we get to I provided emotional support for humans. Yeah. So maybe just a note for your essays, you want to flip that?
Yeah.
But cool.
Scott, let me ask you, what's the difference potentially with this compared to providing quote unquote emotional support during game night at the nursing home?
I think that's a good question. I will ask you. Yeah, I will ask you your feeling about that question, Ryan. You're the one that asked it. You tell us what you think.
Yeah. Again, I think it always comes down to what are you doing? All right, specifically you. There may be some of these therapy sessions where all of the animals are in one room and all you do is you bring the animal, the nursing home residents interact like it's a petting zoo and you're not really doing anything. Right. To me, that's similar to game night where you're just going, playing, having fun with the residents. That's, in my mind, not a clinical experience versus going room to room, interacting, talking to the patient, seeing how they're doing. Obviously, the patient is petting the goat and the chicken and the dog or whatever. But there's more of that emotional connection one-on-one.
Yeah, I agree.
That I would consider clinical.
Yeah, I agree with that. Actually, I don't agree with it, but I'm going to agree so you can go on. No, I'm kidding.
Wow.
God,
Scott's
don't
on it
play.
today.
Don't play with our Premed's emotions like that.
I'm so sorry, dear one. I don't mean to play with your emotions.
Yeah, the salient lesson you can get out of that, guys, is it's not black and white, and it won't be with the admissions committees either.
Yeah, exactly. This is a good opportunity to say that when you have an experience, at some level or another, it's going to be how you describe the experience and how you talk about the experience.
Yeah.
And if an admissions committee member in an interview, for example, challenges you on that, well, I don't really see that's as clinical, then you have to be loaded to respond to that question and to argue with them and say, well, I felt it was clinical for these reasons, ABC, whatever, this is what I did, etc. But you just have to be prepared for all that. Not that necessarily may happen, but you have to recognize that there will be sometimes differing opinions about what is or is not clinical, and you have an opinion about yours that you need to stand firm in, and so if I was an examinee, if I was an interviewer, and I challenged you on that, you just kind of wilted like a flower, then that would be a problem for me. But if you stood up for yourself and said, well, here's why I thought it was clinical, and you really, were forceful about your opinion about that, then that would mean something else to me.
Yeah.
I wish we'd thrown this up before you said all that.
My research involves a clinical aspect to it. I'm wondering if I can count this additional clinical experience. I interact with patients and gather data, but it is research. So I wanted to know if it could be both, or should I just count it as research only? Yeah, we've talked about splitting stuff before. You definitely can split it.
Yep.
If it's is truly research and it's not just a title of research coordinator or something like that, which usually isn't research. You're just kind of gathering data, hanging out with the patient, then that's probably more clinical. But yeah, definitely can split those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Going back to the previous one and what you had mentioned, Scott, about kind of making sure that you're focusing on the right things. I've seen a lot of times students will write something as clinical experience. They'll mark something as clinical experience. And then the first line of the description is, most of my experiences revolved around non-clinical aspects like cleaning the room and changing the sheets. And don't focus on that.
Yeah, right.
Don't talk about that.
It's one thing to have a red flag in your application. It's another thing to have a red flag that you yourself pound into the ground and unfurl.
Like I love that you want to be completely transparent here, but you don't need to shine a light on all of the imperfections.
Exactly.
I swear, I think some of that is so many of us were brought up with this style of argumentative writing where we were told the first thing we had to do was list all the cons and dismiss them. And I'm like, okay, yeah. So our 7th grade English teachers, they did want that, right? But when you've got 1,325 characters,
you got to move on, or less than that. Yeah,
write it for yourself, and then
maybe
move on.
I'm good at this is because I was a horrible English student for a long time.
Yeah, you don't play by those rules.
I do not. No.
Yeah, Ryan gets right to the point. Okay.
I'm over 200 units in undergrad. Oh, that's a lot. I'm currently in a positive trend for my post-bacc classes, both core science and upper division. How do I know when it is enough, like GPA cutoffs and whatnot? Right, Scott, you've talked 45 hours-ish.
Yeah, 40.
Upward trend.
I think 45 hours is depending on what your GPA is. I think if you can gather 45 hours of upper level biological science or hard science classes, but upper level that you have shown to be strong in, strong meaning 3.5 or better, generally speaking, then I think that says that it's a statement. It says I can do this at a high level.
Yeah. At 200 credits, your GPA is not budging much, unfortunately. So I think ideally you're above a 3.0. Sometimes that's impossible, and you just need to bite the bullet and go, I have 60 hours at close to a 4.0. I'm going to apply. I don't really care what my GPA
that's
is
right.
at this point.
No, that's right. Yeah, and I think there are, when we talk about cutoffs, I mean, I think a lot of schools have cutoffs, but I think a lot of schools have a lot of different kinds of cutoffs that they use, and that they look deeper into GPAs and nuances of a GPA, and so it's not all just straightforward, just overall GPA, and here's the cutoff, and you're done if you don't meet that. I don't think it works that way.
Yeah. So for instance, very similar to kind of what we're hoping to build into Mapped with as we dig into the ability more, is a school can say, I don't want to see anyone less than a 3.0 unless their last 60 hours are above this or this, or they could potentially have that sort of algorithm built out.
That's correct. That's correct.
I think, again, going back to Rachel, what you said, it's not all black and white. I think students, just humans in general, we want what is the answer? And unfortunately, it's everything.
Yeah. Yep.
Everything, and it's going to vary school to school, committee to committee, year to year, based on the applicant pool.
Yeah. And that's why
that's right.
Everything.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And I mean, that's why, Ryan, I think you paraphrase me, I'll paraphrase you. You got to put your blinders on, right? Don't look left or right. Just go forward.
That's right. That's right.
As my good friends at Nike say, just do
it. All right. Let's try to squeeze in a couple quick ones before we go.
How do I decide whether or not to take a gap year? You ask yourself, do I need to take a gap year?
Or do I want to take a gap year?
Yeah.
Need and want two different things. And you know, some students just want it because they want to do something that they'll probably never have time for again in their life, you know. And I don't like the emoji that you used at the end of the thing. It makes it sound negative, like a gap year is negative. And so I think a gap year can be one of the best things that a student can do for mental health reasons, for enjoyment reasons, for, you know, financial reasons. I mean, there's a whole just a whole list of things that you can do in a gap year.
But what you did not just mention is gap years are a good thing because it looks good on an application, right? That's the one reason not to take a gap year.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
All right. So this is circling back to a comment you made before.
Academic fresh start. Will my old GPA be calculated in with my new GPA? For AMCAS, yes, it will.
Yes, it will. It only applies, Texas Academic Fresh Start only applies to schools in the state of Texas that are public institutions.
Where you apply through TMDSAS.
That is correct.
Or TMDS, as Rachel used to call it.
I got it now. I got it now.
You got it. We're all learning.
Okay. Well, we are not going to get to everything today, guys. You were hungry.
I like this one. Can I put one up?
Yeah, go ahead.
I like this one.
Not a medical question, but how are you all doing?
We're doing good. I'm so good. I cannot believe how good I am.
Wow.
I'm feeling good. Da-na-na-na-na-na-na, like I should. Da-na-na-na-na. I won't sing anymore, I promise.
Wow.
It's not even like, I don't know, full moon or something today. I don't know what to do.
Can we fit in this last one here?
There's a million. Pick the one you want. Yeah, pick whichever the last one is your meaning.
I see this really big one at the end here.
Nice.
I serve on the Board of Ethics and Equity for the Red X Up study, a project to increase COVID-19 testing in 9 Massachusetts communities and better understand community thoughts on COVID-19 vaccines over the coming months, where my responsibilities involve participating in shared decision-making across each aspect of the work, contributing to the development of the ethics and equity framework, reviewing of additional materials and ethics equity issues that arise.
Wow. There's more. So with the ethics equity issues arise that within the context of the RADX Up implementation. I'm struggling on how to categorize this experience and hoping you can give me some advice. Thank you very much.
Leadership?
Wow. Yeah, definitely leadership. I think it could actually go a number of different directions. It certainly is clinical. Well, involve participating in shared decision making. I guess not really as much clinical, but I definitely think it's leadership experience. And, you know, to me, this sounds like an amazing opportunity that that you're involved with. And I would talk about it anywhere I could in the application, but yeah, I would say definitely a leadership experience.
Yeah, it doesn't sound clinical. Maybe potentially research, depending on what you're doing and how you're doing it. But most definitely research.
Community effort, community service. Yeah,
sure. And it could be right if it's a volunteer position. It could be volunteer, non-medical, clinical. But I think serving on the board, that's I think a good leadership opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree. Cool.
Awesome,
man. I'd like to do that. That sounds like an awesome experience. Right? That's awesome.
Another Ask the Dean in the books, episode 34, here and gone.
It's always wonderful to spend an hour with you guys in the evening, both Rachel and Ryan, but also all the students. I've been a little silly tonight, but I do honor all of you and honor your time that you spend with us and the opportunity that you give us to be a part of your journey. And we feel strongly that this is all that you do the best you can, have a good outlook on life, be positive, and work hard. And it goes back to our mission statement, which you can see listed behind me: work hard, be creative, and do good. These are our values, but these are also things that we hope that you guys will do as well.